I suppose it's a bit like doing drugs. Once you get that success, you would keep doing it.
Welcome to Climate Curious on Crime, a 4-part mini-series examining the psychology behind some of the world's most successful climate crime takedowns.
I'm Maryam Pasha.
And I'm Ben Hurst. And to take us through some of the biggest success stories in the fight against green crime is our special guest co-host, criminal psychologist Dr. Julia Shaw.
Hello. Julia is a criminal psychologist at University College London, regular podcast and TV host, TED and TEDxLondon speaker, and author of the new book, Green Crime, Inside the Minds of the People Destroying the Planet and How to Stop Them.
Guided by Julia, we're going to explore how some of the world's biggest climate criminals have been brought to justice through the eyes of a capable guardian and the psychological aspects of why people are perpetrating these crimes in the first place.
All brought to you in the format of a 4-part series called Climate Curious on Crime. Hello, Julia. Thanks for joining us again. This is an interesting one. There's some spy stuff in this one.
There is.
Should we get into the facts of the case?
I'd love to.
Right. Ben, give us some of the top. Start us off.
Okay, the Shuidong Syndicate case. We're asking, how can we protect wildlife from the present threat of extinction at the hands of organised crime, which I didn't realise was
involved in this.
Like
No. Yeah. So this story covers the twists and turns of the dangerous undercover operations taken by brave agents and offers a glimpse into the heart of one of the largest ivory trafficking groups ever, the Shuidong Syndicate. Beginning and ending in China with 3 little boys, Issey, and Wong, and their uncles in Shuidong, a town that the syndicate claims is a destination for up to 80% of all poached ivory entering China from Africa. Well, fast forward to 2012 in Tanzania. Issey, and Wong are no longer little boys, but ivory kingpins running an illegal smuggling business they have inherited from their uncles. Little did they know that their next step, moving to Mozambique, would see their operation all come tumbling down. This got the antenna of the EIA agents twitching. The EIA is like the detective agency for the environment, who then started working undercover to expose one of the biggest poaching syndicates in the world and their illegal ivory trafficking practices. This all culminated in discovering over 60 elephant tusks in a warehouse in the middle of Mozambique.
That's crazy. Okay, so from the psychology of poaching to perceived benevolence, we're going to get into the psychological aspects of why people are committing wildlife crime and how to stop them. Julia, you met with the psychiatrist turned activist who uses behaviour change to save the animals, right? So maybe you can share with us her take on these crimes.
Yeah, so I met with someone called Ceres Kam, and she works for the Environmental Investigation Agency, which to me always sounds like CIA, because it's EIA. But the organization, they in various ways try to expose environmental crimes of various sorts around the world. And so everything from bloodwood, which is the illegal deforestation and timber logging in various parts of the world, especially conflict zones, and how that gets laundered into other kinds of wood, so like stuff that we have around us. How do you know for sure that it wasn't logged illegally? And so they look at that, and the answer is
this stuff stresses me out, man.
Is there any legal
this
logging
really
of
stuff
wood?
stresses me. This is like finding out that your pizza box is
most logging is legal.
Okay, all right.
Most of it is legal, but a significant amount also
is
isn't.
also illegal.
It's also illegal.
Right.
So the difference between wood, so if you look at the World Wildlife Crime Report, which is one of the things that I cover in this chapter, is you see that timber, so trees, because they're also alive in the natural world, they're also captured within the World Wildlife Report. And they actually have a subsection because they're such a big category. And the difference between things like ivory and things like wood is that wood is actually quite easy to trace where it was from. Whereas ivory is much harder to trace. You can identify the species, but you can't always identify exactly where.
The location.
And this, I didn't realize that mammoth ivory. So in the permafrost, so you know how we've got this thing called climate change that's happening?
No, I haven't heard of it.
And the ice is melting. Yeah. So the ice is melting, revealing mammoths.
Like
woolly mammoths.
Oh.
The bones of woolly mammoths. And they're being thawed in the permafrost. And the tusks from these mammoths are virtually identical to the tusks of elephants today.
Wow.
And so, and the thing is that CITES, which is the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species, it doesn't cover extinct animals, understandably.
Right.
Because they're not endangered, they're extinct.
Yeah.
And so mammoth ivory isn't covered under CITES. And so right now there's a whole category of ivory where they're pretending it's mammoth ivory, which is wild to me.
Oh, so they're killing elephants or taking the tusks off of elephants and pretending that they found it in the Arctic, in the permafrost.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
But also, they are
That's
also
bad.
finding actual ivory in the permafrost, but they have to pretend that that's from live elephants because the particularly Chinese buyers who buy ivory, who are one of the biggest markets still, although we'll get into that, they don't like the sort of feeling, the feng shui of the fact that it was from a dead animal.
Okay.
So it has to be from a live animal.
Oh,
Otherwise,
right.
the energy's bad.
Right.
And so to buyers, they pretend it was from actual animals, from actual
Right.
live elephants. So it's really mind twisty, I think, a lot of this stuff.
So surely it would be...
I don't like any of this, Ben.
Surely it would make more sense to just... for people who want ivory to just buy the ivory that already exists rather than taking the ivory from live elephants. Or no, that's also
You
bad.
mean from mammoths?
Yeah,
Yeah,
from
but if you're doing it for energy and you're doing it for,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
if you're imbuing it
For
with these
vibes,
other,
yeah.
for vibes, exactly, then it's got the wrong vibes.
Okay.
But let's get back to the AA
Yes,
agent.
let me ask a question before we do that, because I have to admit that I don't really understand, other than for, I guess, like cultural significance, like a statue, like I don't know what to call it.
Who buys ivory?
But
Is
what is
I
it
guess
for?
you're
Like,
coming
what
to.
do we use ivory for? I can think of like weird things, like someone has like an ivory comb or an ivory handle
like
or something.
a trinket.
But a trinket. What is ivory actually used for?
Ivory is still used for that as well. So
Okay.
it's used for jewelry. It's used for big and small statues. And
Statues, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, statues is a really big part of it. And art is another piece. So ivory carving is also historically woven into certain parts of the world as part of the culture.
I've seen that.
Pianos?
Pianos used to be. Now
Okay,
it's
not
mostly
anymore.
other things.
I didn't know that.
Basically, for things like billiard balls and pianos, plastics replaced ivory.
Yeah.
But if you have old pianos, they will still have ivory.
Right.
And so you're allowed to own it as long as it's definitely old and not new. And it's complicated. But the main thing is there is an international ban on ivory.
Yes.
And so you're not allowed to move it across borders,
Okay.
which is what that means.
Right.
And a lot of domestic markets, so like in the UK, for example, you're not allowed to buy and sell ivory unless you have a certificate saying it's from before, I think it's 1950.
Okay.
And so it has to be not just before the ban, but it has to be like proper old. And the idea is that it's limiting the ability for poachers to kill new elephants in particular and then move them across borders. But who uses it? It's artists. It's ivory chopsticks are still seen as good luck for newlyweds in China. In India, there's still a market for statues. And Ceres Kam, who is this person I spoke with who works for the Environmental Investigation Agency, she is Chinese and now lives in the UK. But she grew up until recently buying ivory in department stores. So here's Ceres talking about this.
So both in Hong Kong and from Guangzhou, where I originally come from, if you go to the kind of high-end department store, like the equivalent of Selfridges, for example, you would actually have a whole floor selling things like gemstones, ivory, gold jewelry, and so on. So you will have like a whole quarter of the floor would just be ivory. It was a huge carved tusk, just like one after another lined up.
Oh, so this to me was surprising because she's younger than me. So
Yeah.
I like to think of myself as a young lady.
We're not Julia. No, but like,
But
this
she's
is,
like in her mid-30s at most.
Yeah, we're not talking about like 60 years ago. We're
Yeah.
talking about within our very recent lifetime.
Yeah. And so she grew up with whole department store floors filled with ivory. And that is something that has only recently been shut down because there was an international ban on ivory, but there wasn't a domestic ban in China.
That's crazy. So ivory was just like in hobbycraft and stuff.
Well, Selfridges.
Sorry,
yeah.
expensive hobbycraft.
Expensive hobbycraft.
And so does that mean that you would have been able to buy it, but you wouldn't have been able to
Bring
take it
here.
anywhere? That's what the ban would have meant, right? You could actually own it, but you couldn't ship it to anywhere else.
Right, and you could sell and buy it, but you couldn't, that's right, you couldn't move it across borders. Although, if you look at the routes that ivory actually took in terms of where people were buying it, there's markets in Thailand, for example, for a while that were still open markets where you
Right.
could just buy them. And so the idea being that people would travel to Thailand sometimes, buy the ivory there, and then take it to China or take it to India. And so one of the reasons why people might travel and buy it abroad is actually also because people would bring it back as like a gift.
Right.
And so Ceres Kam was talking about this. There was a bunch of research on why people buy ivory and who's buying ivory. Who do you think, until a couple of years ago, was the main buyer of ivory? What's the person? Who is this person?
Probably my mum.
Your mum?
I don't know. I don't know. No, I don't know. But like, I mean,
very
people.
specific.
Yeah, I know. But we would like buy trinkets and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like on holiday, I feel like it's not as like out there as we maybe would imagine it is. I feel like it's maybe a couple of years ago quite a normal thing to go on holiday somewhere and come back with a little elephant with two small fake tusks or real tusks in it. Do you know what I mean? Or a little bit, or a necklace for one of your nieces or something. I feel like that was super normal.
Yeah.
Am I just confessing to the fact that I've got loads of ivory in my house or something? I don't know, but yeah, that's my perception, is that it's closer than we think it is. You're like, Ben is part of the syndicate. No.
So you think sort of,
Tourists.
how old is your mum?
Basically, our parents' generation.
25 and a half.
Yeah.
Okay, so our parents, who do you think is buying ivory? Because in short, the answer is that's not the average buyer.
Okay.
I'm going to say, I feel like I was going to say like rich people.
What do you mean by that?
I feel like that's your answer to everything.
I know. I realize I'm like just having the same answer. I would assume people who are like buying it as presents. Yeah, I don't know.
But who's that person?
More traditional.
Okay.
People, maybe. Like, I can't imagine me buying it or anyone in my family, but we're not very traditional. So people who are maybe more traditional, I don't know. I really don't. I actually have to say I can't imagine anyone buying ivory, because I feel like since we've grown up, it was such a thing to not do it.
Also, like, there's an element of it where I want to say Chinese people, but that feels racist to say that. But you've said that there's like cultural significance to having like chopsticks, for example, gifting them to somebody on their wedding day. So I'd imagine anywhere where culturally there's significance to the material, they would buy it more. But who is
it? Before we like tie ourselves in,
who are the criminals? Who are the people?
Well, certainly the people buying. So we'll get back
not
to
the criminals.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, they're breaking a law, but they're not the syndicate. They are buying a small amount of ivory. It's young women. And so until recently, it was people often in their 20s who were buying it to bring home, often to China. And the idea was that you're bringing it as a gift, and it's a high status gift.
Okay.
And again, chopsticks and like these sort of thinking about who gets married, right? Who's buying presents for that. But it's not the older generation necessarily. It was specifically younger people. And so Ceres Kam actually talked to me about this.
Being very aware that we may not want to, single out a country or a cultural group to say like it's all your bad. There has been studies highlighting the danger of the stereotypical Asian buyer is not helpful in terms of trying to tackle the consumption or the trade.
So simultaneously, she's right in that, of course, we need to be careful that anyone can buy ivory.
Sure.
And there's lots of reasons why people buy ivory, and taste can change and all this.
Yes.
But reports have found that there's, certain kinds of people who, the reason why it's important to profile, and that sounds really bad, but it's meant in a conservation way, to profile people who are most likely to buy this, is also so that you can have interventions and behavior change interventions specifically targeting those people.
Because it does beg the question, like, why do people even like this stuff? Do you know what I mean? Like, I always think this about loads of things, like precious metals, for example. Why do we buy into the idea that a diamond from the ground is more valuable than a diamond made in a
De Beers
laboratory?
did a really good job of marketing.
Why do people care about ivory? Like, why is it not like cow's foot?
It is really nice material to work with. So this is where artists will often say, no, it is beautiful to carve.
Okay.
And so it's quite soft but sturdy, basically.
I want to get back to this case because this is like one of the biggest ivory smuggling syndicates, right? That the EIA busts. I hate that word, but like
the Shuidong Syndicate. Yeah,
it's the Shuidong Syndicate. So can you tell us a bit about how they got there? What happened? Yeah.
So the EIA were going undercover. And so there's these undercover agents who had infiltrated the Shuidong Syndicate, which is something I didn't know was a job, that you could be an undercover agent that infiltrates organized crime for poaching gangs.
Well, I didn't know there was organized crime
for poaching gangs.
Oh, really?
I feel like I had a sense that there was.
I mean, there was one episode of Law and Order on it, so I had a sense. But then most of my understanding of this comes from Law and Order, as you all know.
I mean, most environmental crime is organized
Syndicated.
crime.
I guess it's like, what do you, as like a layperson, what do I have in mind is organized crime?
Yes, good
I'm
point.
imagining like, in my mind, what we're talking about is like the equivalent of Breaking Bad and the DEA. Do you know what I mean? Like, is it the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency?
Yeah.
So it's like a police unit that are targeting people who are doing whatever organized crime looks like. Because organized crime in my mind is like a bunch of people in suits, but it's not, right? It's like people on the ground in gangs, usually moving product around, I imagine. I don't know. How do they even find that? What does that look like to find it? Is it just a warehouse full of ivory?
We know nothing except what Law and Order and Breaking Bad has told us.
Don't let us tell the story. You tell the story, otherwise it's going to be bad.
So the EIA, they do have undercover agents.
Okay.
The people they're infiltrating, picture them as average dudes, in this case from China, and from the place called Shuidong, which is why it's called the Shuidong Syndicate. And they, there's video footage. There's undercover video footage of them. So I know what they look like because their photos are on the internet and their videos of them are on the internet.
But the videos of the EIA?
No, of the perpetrators.
The syndicate. Right.
Because they released a report and they released some of this footage so that they would mobilize police on the ground to do a crackdown.
Wow.
We'll get to that.
Right.
But at this point, to infiltrate the Shuidong Syndicate, the EIA send people to go undercover and win the trust of these poachers.
Right.
And so what they walk into at one of the critical moments that I write about in Green Crime is that they've worked really hard to gain the trust of the people who are in t-shirts and jeans. These are like normal dudes. And they take them into the middle of nowhere. So they drive for like an hour. And they're just like, what is happening? And it's really sketchy because they've been texting back and forth, pretending to be buyers. They've met them in person a bunch of times in sort of casual locations.
In public.
In public, exactly. But they've sort of joked about, like, you know, we'd be interested. And they sort of slowly crept in that we'd like to buy a really big order, basically.
Okay.
But we need to see some goods before we can commit.
Right.
So you need to prove to us that you actually have it.
So you have the bulk order, or you have the small, like, is it like they bring pendants and they're like, look, this is what we've got, or is it like we need to see big tusks?
We need to see big tusks.
Okay,
yeah.
right.
So it's like you could be all talk, and so we need proof. Like, it's almost like we were going to order a big load of cocaine, so we need to see that you're capable of having cocaine, and we need to try some of the goods.
Yeah.
And so it's the equivalent with ivory,
Right.
which I know, right?
Some ivory, yeah, as you do, yeah.
As you do, and you can't just like show up with a little bit of ivory because it's the tusks that we're after.
Anybody could have
because anyone could
ivory.
just anyone could
because they sell it in department stores. Okay, all right.
Not anymore.
Yeah, right, but they did.
They did.
It was readily available.
Yes. And so they've won the trust. They've been texting back and forth. They've had all these meetings. And they're supposed to drive to this place on their own. But this guy's like, no, get in my car. And they're already like, oh, no. Because they've got a wire at this point.
Yeah, that's
they're
when
hooked
guys
up.
Yeah,
exactly. And they're
Yeah.
like, oh, no. Has someone tipped these guys off?
Yeah.
And so they get picked up. And this guy's just chatting. And they're in the car. And I can just... in my head, I'm just like, I could just feel them because it's dark and they're in China at this point and they're just driving and they're like, where the fuck are we going, right? And so they get to this house where the paint's just peeling off. It's just this random ass house. Again, you're thinking,
house,
oh
yeah.
no.
We're gonna get rubbed out here, yeah.
And they get out of the car and there's people standing outside, like, keeping guard, which also
Always a good sign.
Well, both expected and problematic, right? They get out of the car, and from this point, the footage is visible on the internet. So they release the footage from this point on. So I've seen what happens next, which is they get out of the car, they're crunching through some gravel, and the guys in Chinese are like, "Come here, come with me," and then they see two other guys who they'd met before. At this point, it's Zhe and Wong, who are three people who they've met, and they go into this warehouse. And it's just this really boring room. That's just like, picture a white room, just a box. And there's what look like almost branches piled on the ground. I don't know if you've ever seen a raw tusk, but they kind of just look like curved branches.
White. Or not?
Well, they're not
white?
quite white because they dig with them and they sort of have like a rougher outside.
Oh, right.
And so they're not quite as
yeah.
ivory as you think of for ivory.
Yeah.
And so they're just stacked, and they're this lovely stack, and there's just this huge pile of them, and they've got this on camera, and so they're just chatting and they're pretending to be casual, and
Where
they're
are these
smoking
cameras?
on them.
Like buttons.
Yeah, well, good question. I
Who
don't know.
Oh, we can't give away the secrets. Okay,
don't know.
right. It's spy stuff.
But you can. The tension is palpable, and their acting is really good, and they're just trying to
Yeah,
keep it cool
you
because
better
this is
hope
the
it
moment
is.
they've been working towards. They're like,
Right.
we've got them, and all we need is to share this evidence with the cops, and then there'll hopefully be a crackdown. But first, they need to get out of the
Yeah,
situation.
we need to survive it.
Yeah. And so they do, and then they write a report and they release it. And initially, nothing happens. And this is another thing: is that they've done all this work. They've spent months and months and months
Wow.
gaining the trust, going to this dangerous location abroad, and they come back and they're like, "Why is nobody? We've released a report. We told the Chinese authorities what's going on."
Oh, wow.
And said differently, they think nothing's happening because the Chinese authorities don't tell them what's happening.
Right.
But it turns out they have actually got to work. But then they release this footage online and make it public. They basically go, no one's doing anything if we just tell them. And so we're going to release this stuff
nightmare.
online.
Yeah.
Is it? Sorry.
That's a misstep, right? Because they were doing stuff. It sounds like they were doing stuff.
They were doing, well, it's a good question. I mean, they would argue that this might have also encouraged them to go
faster.
harder and faster in terms of the crackdown.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there is a question there in terms of like something fell apart there in terms of the
Right.
communication, which they on both sides was probably disadvantageous.
Okay, so it must be very emotional to walk into a room full of elephant tusks. Like,
Oh, I hadn't even.
you know, like when
thought
I think about
at
that,
all,
I
yeah.
just think like all I would see is just like piles of dead elephants. That's like what my mind would imagine.
Yeah.
It must like. Do they ever talk about? Do any of the agents? Do anyone ever talk about like the like how it feels to see these things that are like basically show that you've killed a bunch of beautiful animals?
Yeah, and it's not just that, but with tusks. So there's 60 tusks approximately in this warehouse, and that means that there's 30 elephants that were killed, right? And
And do you have to kill an elephant to get the tusks?
you don't have to, but they
they
do.
do, okay.
Because then you get all of the ivory.
Okay.
It's the same with rhino horn, is that you don't actually have to kill the
You could
rhinos.
just cut it off,
You could
but-
just cut off. In fact, it kind of grows back.
Yeah.
And so you could just let it, but it's really slow the way it grows back. And if you're going to go out of your way to kill some elephants and to like find them in the middle of the forest, you're going to take all of it. And so what they actually often do, also because they got to get out of there quickly, because there's quite a lot of monitoring now, especially in certain parks where there's this fight. I mean, I spoke to some rangers and like they perceive it as like a war. They're like,
Yeah.
people show up with AK-47s and
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
taking our animals.
Yeah.
And so they need to be really quick about it as well. And so what often actually happens is they quite literally chainsaw off the elephant's face,
No.
and then they book it.
No.
And so
no.
it's really brutal. And so this is something that Ceres Kam was also talking about, is that something that sometimes also ivory buyers are missold, is
Right.
that
Oh.
the ivory is just sort of cut off and it grows back.
Yeah,
and
it's
totally
fine. The elephants aren't harmed.
It's like,
in the-
well-
in the-
Exactly.
Yeah.
which is mostly a lie. And she said that actually one of the campaigns in China, which was targeting young women, which is why that profiling of
Is
who's
important.
buying this was
Yeah.
important. They had celebrities. They had like pop stars who were like had these little campaigns where they did a little like baby elephant tusk, like trunk as the sign for it, and the campaign was called Travel Ivory Free. And they had all these like celebrities going like this and all these pictures of baby elephants. The idea being, because you don't harvest tusks from baby elephants or don't kill baby elephants for tusks, you kill their parents, but then you orphan the babies as well.
Right.
And so there's
all of this sucks.
These are all things that I have not considered.
What are some of the things like? How do they like Shay, and Wong? How do they get into this? Is this like the family business? Like, who are these guys? Because what really struck me about your story, before I go all emotional about elephants, was that like the three like, are these like the heads of the syndicate? These three guys, and why are they taking these buyers? Like, surely you have minions to do this.
well, so Shay and Wong, minions, yeah. So Shay and Wong, they were so much like in most organized crime, it's a family business.
Okay.
And so you've got the situation where their uncles were already ivory kingpins, you could say, and they had got into it. So you can keep tracing it back, right? How did they get into this? Because they were trading in other kinds of goods. And so they were moving things across borders. So you could trace it back to the uncles who were, they were transporting other things across borders. And then they got into legally initially.
Okay, right.
Interesting,
Legally.
right? Legally.
And then they started
That's interesting.
harvesting animals that were sort of smaller creatures like pangolins that for a while, now obviously they're on all of our radars.
No, you really care about pangolins,
Man,
now, don't you?
they're just so cute.
They're just too much. Make a puppet pangolin for 3 days and you'll care about a pangolin.
Right.
But pangolins and like glass eels, like there's all these like
Slow lorises.
well, those are more for pets, right? And zoos.
They like their eyes.
Eyes. Oh, I didn't know that one. That's not as common in terms of the sort of main ones.
I'm glad.
But yeah, so they started being asked basically by others. Well, we've got these other illegal things that you could take across borders.
Right.
Do you want to move those for us? And then they're like, yeah, sure. And so they basically crept into more and more severe kinds of trafficking.
Right.
And by the end of it, they'd realized that ivory trafficking was going to make them much more money than the legal stuff. Tauba fish, I think, is what they were initially transporting, which is a specific kind of fish that like the locals didn't care about in wherever they were from, and they dried them and sold them. And so it was like this like really simple thing, really. And then they escalated up to ivory.
This feels like it ties into those 6 pillars in green crime again, like around impunity and like ease, right? Like if they're just like, we transport things anyway, no one's catching us, let's just keep doing this.
Yeah, and that incremental impunity as well, where you sort of try another thing, you're still not getting caught, everything's going through. You call it a plastic pellets business, and so you just shove everything into the plastic pellets.
Right.
And you choose your ports as well. And so this is a classic thing for smuggling, is that much like with drugs and people and guns, is that you choose the ports that are going to be the most advantageous to you. And actually, Ceres Kam, who was going through the court documents for this case and translating it for the EIA from Chinese, she talks about how this was a family business.
In the Shuidong case, as well as quite a number of other networks, in different parts of the world, there is this phenomenon. It's often also a bit kind of family business. So they have someone in their family who has already been dealing in kind of like a gray area. They do some kind of legal trade, and then on top of that, they do a little bit of smuggling. So they have already identified routes that will work. They have already the kind of context that can link them up to suppliers. And I suppose then at some point when they get sufficient funds and see that actually, you know what, at the moment there isn't much law enforcement attention on this thing, and let's try and make a shipment. And if the first shipment gets through, then I suppose it's a bit like doing drugs. Once you get that success, you would keep doing it.
But how did the EIA find them?
Oh, the EIA, yeah. So the Environmental Investigation Agency. I spoke with campaigns director Julian Newman, who used to be an undercover agent himself.
Okay, so
and
knows the spy stuff.
He knows the spy stuff because he did the spy stuff for decades.
Yeah,
and he was saying that he no longer can be on the ground. He has to work from HQ in London. There's a London office and a New York office, but he had to work from London because he's this really like conspicuous blonde white tall man, and he's like, that is not who's currently buying.
Nobody's buying it anymore. Yeah. We don't believe you.
We won't believe you. He's like 10 years ago or 20 years ago I could have shown up and people would have been like, yeah, you are a realistic buyer. Now you look sus. And so obviously I can't do it, and so we need to have people, especially from certain areas where we know that there is a market. And so they specifically hired people who were from China, for one, and who could speak Chinese. Important, right? So you can speak to people in the language. And they could recognize as well the specific Shuidong accent. And so this is where
That's interesting.
they were, and they knew from their research that a lot of the ivory trade had moved to Mozambique because there had been crackdowns in Tanzania. And so everyone was like scrambling to find a new turf, basically. And so they had this intel going, okay, we think people are now here. And specifically, you're looking for certain kinds of accents and certain kinds of people who are going to be more conspicuous. Again, we're in Africa. Like, most people are black. Most people are not Chinese. And most people are not like there to buy things in that way. And yeah, it's multicultural, but you can profile a little bit in terms of trying to target people to try and, start your investigation. And so they recognized this accent. They were in the same hotel sort of area, and they knew that this is where generally people hung out, and they got lucky, basically.
Yeah.
And these guys started chatting about how they're in town to buy things, and that was immediately for the undercover agents. They're like, this is how people talk about poaching, so it's like a bit hazy what they're here to do. And plastic pellets, that nobody ships plastic pellets from Mozambique. Like, why would you buy plastic pellets here? And so they clued in that there was something fishy going on, and after getting their contact information, they were texting with them for weeks, and then for months, and then it just kept going, and they'd start sending them receipts and order receipts, and like from the traffickers trying to win over, because they're winning each other over, right? And so they're trying to win over the EIA, who they don't know are undercover agents, and the undercover agents are trying to socially engineer the situation so that they share as much as possible. But then they get to the situation where, okay, we've got these receipts, we've got lots of evidence, but it's not enough to prove that they actually have ivory.
Right.
And so that's how they end up flying over to China.
So here's another question for you, and just in general, which is interesting, because EIA is an NGO, right? It's not the government. It's not the UN. It's not Interpol.
It's an NGO.
Yeah.
It's a charity. Not a charity, but non. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a non-profit.
It's not the police.
It's not the police. So these people are doing this spy, undercover kind of. How does that then translate to law enforcement? And how do law enforcement feel about a bunch of non-law enforcement people?
Random Greenpeace people just being spies.
Well, lots of them are former police officers.
Okay. I imagine so, because I imagine there's a certain.
If you're
recruiting, I didn't breathe for ages there. That's so shocking. They're just normal people. That's not normal people.
This could be your next career.
No, it couldn't. No, it could not. I'd not be able to do. But that's so crazy. They're not, because that means that you could just be killed in that moment, and that, like we're talking about impunity, there would not be the full force of the law behind catching you or catching the perpetrators of the crime.
There's no one. It's just you.
That's terrifying.
But think about it. It's closer to investigative journalism.
Okay.
Right.
Think about it
which is also scary.
Right.
Yeah.
And think about, journalists who go into conflict zones.
Yeah.
And
when nowhere has your back and you can get killed.
It's more similar to that.
Right.
And that is ultimately also what they end up producing. Is that what they do is they collect evidence, they produce reports, and those reports are shared with government first.
Right.
And they are they're talking to local enforcement agencies, and they're talking to wildlife police forces as well, which they exist. So environmental crime police forces exist, although it's often sort of a subsection. But there is an exchange, and Ceres Kam was actually talking about this with me. How? So there is exchange between the EIA and law enforcement. And so they create these reports that they first submit to law enforcement and border, like customs agents, and to embassies. So one of the first things Julian Newman did is, as the man on the ground in London, he compiled the report with this video footage of the tusks, and he goes to the Chinese embassy and he goes, "We found this. Here you go. Please do something about this."
You might be interested, yeah.
Right, because it's illegal under their laws as well. It's not just it's illegal. There's something they should be doing something about. It's not like it's like a optional.
So how do they get the money to pull off the operation? Like surely you have to buy ivory in order to convince people that you're going to buy big bits of ivory. You have to buy reasonable sized amounts of ivory or something. I would imagine there has to be some kind of exchange.
There isn't, crucially.
Oh, okay.
And that's one of the challenges for the EIA is both that they have a strict rule. They don't buy anything that's poached and never give poachers money.
Okay.
Because also, it's not just ivory poaching. So I use this case because it's a really big success story. And I thought it was a really interesting way of showcasing quite a lot of the things that happen in various kinds of environmental organized crime. But it's the same in forestry crimes, it's the same in ocean crimes, it's the same, or what's sometimes called blue crimes, it's the same in even like waste crimes. You've got similar kinds of structures where you've got organized crime and waste being illegally moved and burned and traded and customs agents looking the other way. So it's similar kinds of issues, and in all of these they don't give money to the criminals, basically. And so they have to win their trust in other ways and prove themselves.
I guess because they're not law enforcement, it's not like they
can't commit crimes.
Oh, they don't
can't
have
commit
impunity.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they can't commit crimes. And
very
the other thing, especially for animals more than for waste, is that they need to make sure they don't what they call trigger an incident. So they can't be the reason that someone goes out and poaches to prove to them that they can poach.
Right.
And so it's a real you have to be really careful and delicate about how.
Oh man.
I want to get into the psychology of this a little bit, about the psychology of organized crime. If we can talk about this, and like, what are some of the psychological concepts at play in terms of wildlife crime, in terms of organized crime?
One of the things that I found most interesting psychologically is that people, when you hear the word poacher, I think most people still think of a person who goes to, let's say, South Africa, shoots like a tiger or a lion and mounts its head and flies home and it's basically trophy hunting. I think that's still what a lot of people think when they hear when they hear about hunting as well. This kind of like wildlife being killed. Like they think majestic creatures, they think rich people, maybe going on safari and or like being sort of unethical in that way.
Like National Geographic meets Boys Club.
Yeah. Sort of so.
Yeah, like old white dudes who like kill it and show it to their friends. Yeah.
And like collect the big five, which is how it's often talked about. And that is a thing that there are people in, especially the States, who buy specific tour, like they go on trips to parts of the world so that they can kill the big five, which are elephants, rhinos, or what are the other ones?
Is it cheetahs?
Tigers, lions, and
leopards.
leopards. Yeah, something like that.
This is the worst, might be the worst phrase I've ever heard.
The big five.
Yeah.
I mean, the big five is also talked about in general, but that's like the most emblematic species in the world. Yeah. But the idea is, I would like to kill all of them, please. And so they take the
Can we also talk about, do you cover this, like, maybe this is a tangent, but like, why do people want to do that? What is going on in people's minds when they want to go and kill these animals? Like, why? I can't imagine ever wanting to do something like that.
I think often it's a form of performative masculinity, and it can also be just, I guess, exciting is the perception. And if it's normalized in your community, as in like the group that you surround yourself with.
Yeah, so I think, well, not that I'm a psychologist, but I also think that there's it scratches an itch in people's brain for like risk-taking behaviour and the performative aspect of like having a trophy, like showing dominance in a group, dominance over animals. Like it's just weird, But like, why wouldn't you just have a pet? Like
apex predator.
Right, we're at the top of the food chain.
We can
survival of the
do
fittest.
This. Yeah, I think but what I was surprised by is because I think the messaging, certainly in sort of pop culture, is mostly, if it's at all around wildlife, the killing of wildlife, it's around this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But really who's doing this is incredibly poor people in small towns in the middle of nowhere, often, near nature reserves or other natural spaces, who are often basically destitute, or are just making ends meet and just able to feed themselves. And so they can't break out of their small town. And so if you want to, for example, send your kid to school, you need money. And you can't get money if you have an insular economy and all you are doing is sort of growing and eating what you grow. You need to be able to make some money as well. And so poaching bosses, they're called. So they're the middlemen. So like in all organized crime, there's levels. Much like in corporate crime, there's levels. And so you've got at the top, you've got the money, and you're asking sort of where's the money come from? And the answer is the money usually comes from previous crimes.
Okay.
Or from investors. So they're quite literally, like in business context, called investors. I mean, it's the same if you want to start a drugs cartel. Like, you need startup capital.
No, I know.
That's our next podcast.
Yeah. I watch series. Yeah.
And so you need startup capital, and you usually start small, and then you grow, and you use, the capital you make or money you make to invest in more stuff, and then you grow your business. It's the same. And so in this case as well, they had like multiple investors for a specific ivory transaction. And so they'll be like, for these 60 tusks, we're going to get investors from here, and we're going to tell them they're going to double their money. Right?
Right.
And so at the top, you've got that, and you've got the uncles still, who've already made lots of money, and they can give it to Issey and Wong. And so they're like, yes, go get us these tusks, we're in. And then in Mozambique, they then had sort of this boss, this fixer, effectively, who was a black man named Mazude. That's always how he's described, a black man named Mazude, in that exact description. Yeah. I don't know if it's his real name even.
Yeah.
But that's how it's always described in the court documents.
Specific and generic enough.
Yes.
So, yeah. We know who that is, but we don't know who that is. Yeah.
But again, it's also like, if you're a Chinese person showing up in a small town in Mozambique, it might also be sus. And so again, you're sort of working with people's stereotypes there. And so this man would
who's perceived as local,
right, who's perceived as local and more trustworthy maybe, and also who speaks the local languages. And so he showed up in these small towns, and he would basically wave money around and say, who's up for poaching some elephants? And he was the one who made sure that they would go out, and he would give them enough money to get bullets, to have enough food to go, because these hunts would take weeks often. And so he would send them in with this money and money for bribes, so that the police officers who were around would get paid off to look the other way. And so that was the arrangement. And one thing that I didn't realize is that not only do obviously the people who are poaching, they don't want to kill the animals. Like, they don't, I mean, maybe at worst, they don't really care about the elephants. But at best, in terms of like ethically, they're quite conflicted themselves about the fact that they're having to kill these elephants.
Their local, because it's their environment again, like it's their home.
Is there? Well, although the conflict with elephants does make it more of a threat to. There's some interesting conversations that happen locally around the hatred of elephants because they come and trample your stuff.
Smash up all of your stuff. When I was in Nairobi, I was having this conversation with some of the Maasai tribes, people that I met, about lions and about them, because they have all of these traditions of like killing lions to take wives, or coming back with like tails or manes, and like proving their position in their tribe, but then also about protecting their land from predators, from protecting their livestock from animals that are trying to come in and take their stuff. And so they know that killing lions is now illegal, and so they do the best they can do to comply with that, but also like it's maybe slightly more complicated.
I guess what I mean is that, like you were saying about, we were talking about indigenous communities. It's not like indigenous communities don't also extract from the land. But they extract in a way at a level that doesn't like wipe out an entire population and then that's done, right? Like I think local people always kind of understand that level versus people when it is an outside influence coming in and trying to take everything.
And that's what research finds, is that basically anywhere where there's wild animals, people are going to kill them sometimes. And sometimes for food, sometimes because they're threats, sometimes for other reasons like cultural reasons or just because they can. But we know that as soon as money is involved, the threats to the collapse of those populations, those elephant populations, those lion populations, is immediately escalated. And so it is, in fact, the idea that there's someone coming from outside saying, basically, give me all you can find.
Exactly.
And then they can't recover because you're poaching at a rate that the animals can't breed, basically. And so they can't replace themselves. And so the population collapses. And so that's the risk with outsiders coming in. And so, but psychologically, basically, I felt really sorry for the people who are actually going out and killing the elephants. It's a really brutal job. It's really hard. It takes weeks. These are like grown elephants because you have to wait for the tusks to be a certain size. So these are huge creatures. And they're out there with chainsaws because it's really hard otherwise to get these off. And they're like, and it's bloody and it's gross. And they're then also
rangers.
There's rangers that can shoot you, that can put you in prison. You often get
I'm assuming no one does this because they're like, this is my favorite thing to do.
Exactly.
It is no other option.
It's a no other option, or it's very, very few other options.
Yes.
And so that to me was really important. And if you look at the bosses, and there's some research on bosses in prisons. So once, because obviously some of these people get caught, and the middlemen as well, and they get imprisoned. And there was one study in particular that was like one of the only ones to actually interview these people who had like were on the ground paying for poachers, and they asked them, how do you feel about the fact that you created these poaching industries? And they said, well, we're creating jobs, like we're good people.
Wow.
And so they're like, we're benevolent, we're the good guys.
Yeah. And is that because like, so for Wong and Shay, they're not, they poached an elephant? Like, have they actually killed an elephant themselves? Have they been there and done the job? Or
No.
they just, so they don't experience the emotional turmoil of, or the fear, or the anxiety, or the stress of actually doing the act.
That's right. And I was talking to Ceres Kam about this, and here's something that she said.
With this kind of very big transnational networks, the principal criminals, they don't get their hands dirty at all. So that may be something that is interesting to look at. You know, we talk a lot about arrest and seizures, but at the end of the day, the people sitting in the middle of that spider web is more or less untouched.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was going to ask you is so the people who are basically being paid to do this, they're the ones that are likely to get caught by the rangers.
Yeah.
Then you can imagine the bosses are like the on the ground, the fixers are likely to get caught because they can be identified very easily by the poachers if they're caught. Like, I'm just thinking logically, but then the bosses, like the real people in charge, are often not even in that country.
Right. And the only reason that Shay and Wong were in Mozambique at all is because they had an order before where they were ripped off.
Right.
I know. There's always like a bit of a comeuppance moment, isn't there?
Because I was like, again,
Criminals
don't
get criminals.
they have minions? Like, why are you going?
Right. But they were in China, in Shuidong, and they received their load of tusks, and they're like, these are terrible tusks.
Right.
And so they flew to Mozambique to make sure that the next
To meet
load
the
of
black man
tusks
named- what
were
was
better,
his
because
name?
you can't like go to the police and be like, my illegal contraband that I shipped across
Yes.
the world illegally
Yes.
wasn't up to standards. And so that's why they were there. And that was also lucky for the EIA that they were able to get people from the top, which isn't as common, because normally the rule, much like for most crime, is don't touch the goods.
Remember when we were like, I don't know, it was like the 90s, early 2000s, where people were like, oh, but if we don't hire these children in these sweatshops making our sneakers, then where will these children go? They'll be on the street. And it's do you remember that argument? And it was like,
Like the
okay,
alternative is worse.
the
Basically.
alternative is worse. And it's like, okay, we need to have a conversation about that, because the alternative to poverty is not child labor.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if this perceived benevolence, how far does it go? Do the people in more further up in the center of that spider's web feel that as well? That they're kind of like, this is our community. I don't know, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of rationalization. So back to the 6 pillars.
Yes.
I think rationalization and conformity play a huge role, especially at the level of the bosses. And so this idea of we're doing something good for other people. This isn't for me. This is for them. Like, yes, I agreed. I mean, sure. I also get something out of this, and I know that it's harmful to
But
the
so does the CEO of BP.
Exactly. Back to rationalizing.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
conformity.
we're no worse than anybody else.
Yeah, no worse than anyone else.
Exactly. These animals might go extinct, but who cares? And this is actually something that I had to... So, confession.
Oh, we haven't had one of
We
those
haven't had
in a
a climate
while.
confession in a while. Right, climate confession time. Play the music.
Climate confession. I think elephants are beautiful, but I was a bit like, why should we care about them going extinct? Like,
Okay,
animals go
I can
extinct all the
understand
time.
that. Yeah.
All the time. Like, every day animals are going extinct. We're also discovering new species all the time.
animals,
And there are new species evolving all the time. So in my head, I was like, why should we care? And I spoke with these people in Portsmouth who are teaching this wildlife crime course. And I spoke with scientific experts who study biodiversity. And what I found is that I did in fact care,
Yeah.
Because
they're pretty important.
they're not just cool looking,
Yeah.
but they are ecosystem engineers, and we really need them.
Yes.
And so we need them for seed dispersal because they poop at really long distances. We need them
those.
to mow down some of the
trample
trees,
the
to make
ground,
and to make little lakes so that so other animals can benefit from them. We need them. Like
they're
we
pretty
need
important.
right, and they're megafauna, and they're some of the last megafauna we have left, and without them, we are kind of screwed.
Yeah, because all the mammoths are in the permafrost.
Because all the mammoths.
Yeah.
Well, and we're just
These
really
are
good
the
at killing
things.
really big animals because
Yeah.
I think generally because they're easy to see.
Yeah.
Like, and you get a lot. Like, you shoot one creature and you get like food for a village.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that, but also we don't
And
have
because
much
we have guns.
left. Yeah. Well, even before guns, we were really good at killing big animals. But I learned to care for them because there was in my mind this conflict the entire time as well, where it's like, why should we care about the elephants? Why don't we only care about the humans in these areas? Because again, if we're talking about like destitution and we're talking about people, also, this surprised me, a lot of the people who were poaching ivory also got paid in elephant meat.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I hadn't
Understandable.
really considered.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you read some of the reports, it's like, oh, no, that doesn't happen. And Ted Leggett was like, it happens all the time. It's just that they don't trade it internationally. And so it
Yes.
doesn't show up on other people's radars.
Yeah.
Right.
But
right.
that is, in fact, part of the payment.
But isn't this like going back to everything we have ever talked about on this podcast, that it's all intersectional, that like it isn't just like you
climate issue.
can't just care about the elephants without caring about the people. You can't just care about the people without caring about the ecosystems. Like everything is an interconnected system, and it's when we just prioritize one thing that we in either direction, either in the kill everything else or in the only conserve and preserve one thing, that we end up screwing the whole thing up. Like you know, like these conservation areas that keep out people, as if somehow there haven't been people living on that land peacefully with that nature for a really long time. So I don't know, I think it's really interesting that to have that realization, because I think we've had that realization over and over again on the podcast, because I definitely came at this with obviously you see me, I get very emotional about big elephants. I think they're incredible creatures, but I mean I'm in this for the people, but like we've had this realization over and over that it's like so interconnected, so deeply reliant on each other.
Well, and it felt a bit like a distraction, I guess, because since we were little, I mean, the actual symbol of CITES, of the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species, the symbol is an elephant.
Yes.
And the reason for that, I learned, is because that was one of the first megafauna that we were trying to save. And so because it was so obvious that they were going extinct, people were like, this would be a problem. A travesty, both in terms of just their existence and also because they're important. That was one of the species that was really rallied for. And successfully. Now we have this international ban and their populations are largely recovering. But in my head, I was like, this feels like a distraction, like just because they're cool looking. Like, there's something called the charismatic megafauna bias, which is basically these creatures have cool faces and they look kind of dinosaur-y.
We like beautiful things, like, right?
What are the other megafauna?
Like pandas. Well, actually, they're not megafauna. Giraffes.
Yeah.
Giraffes are megafauna.
Which are also cool.
cool.
I would vote for them.
I think actually lions and pandas do also count because they're also
impressive.
they're more charismatic than mega, less impressive. But yeah, it's this idea that they're charismatic, they're cute, we like looking at them.
Yeah.
And I was like, is that what's going on with elephants? Because psychologically, we're just like, oh, but that's kind of cool. I want to protect that one.
Yeah.
And that's where I was like trying to recognize whether this was a bias in myself.
What about all the reptiles?
Yeah. But the answer is we actually do need them.
Yeah, and in defense of elephants, we haven't had a good elephant movie in a long time. We've had Kung Fu Panda, we've had Lion Kings, live action Lion Kings. I don't remember any good elephant movies.
That's true.
So
We've got some mammoths.
Dumbo.
Yeah.
We've got Dumbo.
I mean,
that's a long time ago though. Was there a Dumbo live action? I don't know. Anyway, sorry, tangential.
But what I was when I was speaking with scientists about this as well, they were talking about how the other thing, especially in conservation, if we lost the elephants, that would be such a massive blow to conservation. Like it's basically like we can't even do this one species. And on top of that, it's that, and this is actually more with rhinos. So rhinos are also still poached quite heavily, especially because the horns are just still worth a lot of money compared to basically anything else you can poach. And so the rhino horns sell abroad, especially for Chinese medicine. So it's like ground into powders and stuff. But the when I was talking with the rangers in South Africa who were protecting a range that had rhinos on it, what the rangers were saying is that one of the reasons why it's really good to have rhinos on your land is because what it means for the land. So in order to be able to sustain rhinos, you have to do all these other things that make your land really biodiverse, that make it really inhabitable. And that was a new way of thinking about it for me, where it's like what the megafauna represent in terms of the health of the planet more generally.
Yeah, the habitat. Yeah. They're not just a drain on the resource. They also make sure that the resource it has to be good for them to be there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's both ways.
Yeah.
I'm really so I think the one question I have, because I feel like this is an answer I don't want you to tell me, but I think I have to ask it, is it's easy, I think, for Ben and I to be like, well, we would never buy ivory. You know, like we're
not me.
No, okay.
I'm like, I've got to make some conscious decisions. Yeah.
But you didn't, when you were starting to do this research, like when you were doing this research, you didn't just look at ivory, right? You looked at like lots of different kinds of smuggling and crime related to the environment. What are some surprising things that people could be complicit in that we don't even realize?
That is a long list, unfortunately. So, well, we
talked about wood in the beginning.
We did talk about wood. So there's a lot of laundered wood, where it's illegal wood that's mixed in with legal wood. That is something we almost certainly have all bought, especially if you go to play. I mean, price is a good indicator. That being said,
what does that mean? High or low?
Both, in fact.
Yeah.
Basically, if you go to the extreme ends, you're probably complicit in some sort of bad thing. But it depends on what the reason is for the price, right? So if a piece of wood is expensive because of the ethical treatment of the people who work in that place, but also it's cultivated properly, fine. But if you go to things like rosewood, which is one of the most poached species of wood in the world, which is also endangered, that's something that's more a luxury good. And so rosewood, and there's specific wood for yachts.
I think my answer is going to come back.
I'm going to have to really
And this really makes me sad, because
seriously.
actually of all the luxury things that are completely ridiculous, extravagant, and we don't need, I love yachts. I've never been on a yacht. I confess. I've never been on a yacht.
Julie's
And you
like,
love them.
I know. But I
You love the idea of a yacht, then.
I basically always go to marinas and look around. I
Just
think they're
like,
beautiful.
one day, yeah.
So you like admiring a yacht.
I love admiring a yacht, and I know that they're terrible in so many, many ways. But now there's another reason.
Like the sports cars of the seas.
I know.
Yeah.
So
I do judge you a little bit.
Yeah, you should. I mean, you should. I judge myself.
But there is a specific kind of wood that is almost exclusively used for yachts because it's really good for yachts, for boats. And that is, it basically has to be poached at this point because we've run out. And so that there's the luxury market, but the bigger problem isn't the luxury market because that's small. The bigger problem is the mass market. Right. And that's where you get reports saying that, I'm not going to name any specific companies, don't sue me,
or us.
There are some very, very big companies that if you just look at the EIA website, for example, plop in wood, you'll get a whole list of different kinds of people and companies that they found that incorporate either parts of wood that is from conflict zones or from illegal sources, or that entirely sells it. And so sometimes they get exposed and there'll be like a news report somewhere, but it's usually sort of on like page 58 of whatever, right? It's not made a big deal of, even though it is a big deal. The other things are 1 in 5 fish that end up on our plates are poached. So fishing, illegal fishing.
And not in a good way.
Not in a good way. No, not poached like salmon. No.
Eggs.
No, poached as in illegally pulled out of the sea. And my 4th chapter is on illegal fishing and green crime. And that's where I go into blue crimes and that whole world of illegal fishing, which is huge. Again, there you can look for certain certifications to try and not do that, to not make sure that there's ethical fishing.
Which I think is important because a lot of people eat fish for ethical reasons. Yeah. So you then go do the work.
Yeah, and actually the main thing with fish is, well, I know this is a controversial thing to say, I'm a really big fan of fish farms. Ethical fish farms are, if they're done properly, much like ethical chicken farms, if they're done properly, like I'm not talking like mass, like as many as possible in there, they are the only way you can stop bycatch. Like the
And what's
only way
bycatch for those of us who are
bycatch is
not?
when you throw big nets into the actual ocean and you pull up everything that ends up in your net. And what you end up doing is killing loads and loads of creatures that you're not trying to catch. And instead you're sort of like rinsing the ocean of its creatures rather than being like, we actually just want the salmon, and so we're just going to breed some salmon.
And okay, this is like a whole idea. The fish thing is a whole other episode.
But there's other things like oud. So like scents.
Okay,
So oud is commonly
the
poached.
drama.
Why? How is oud poached?
No.
Oud, do you know how oud is
No.
created? Oud is a type
Dead
of sap.
trees, right?
Yeah, you injure a tree and it basically bleeds, effectively. And the thing that it's oozing, it's like a resin, I think is actually what it is. You then cut the resin out and you make it into this scent called oud, which is in lots of candles and perfumes.
Yeah.
It's sort of a musky scent. I quite like it. I know that you don't.
No.
Yeah, I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence. It could be done well. It could be done terribly. But yeah.
It's really popular.
Yes, it is really popular.
And it is commonly poached. And so oud is another thing.
What is that?
Orchids?
So wait. Oud being poached is because the trees that they are getting this resin from are endangered.
Well, or they're getting it from places where they're not supposed to get it from. So like nature reserves.
Right. Okay.
So there's different things
Ways
that can count
be
as
poached. Yes, I'm just trying to understand. And then what were you saying? Orchids?
Orchids, cacti. There's a huge illegal cactus market.
Avocados.
No, not avocados.
I don't know.
No.
I just feel like everybody hates avocados.
That's
so
for
I was
different.
like,
That's
maybe
for,
throw that one in
That's for
case.
different. Although avocados.
I could have been right, and then that would have been sick,
I
really.
don't. I mean, like, I might get sued for this, but avocados is because in America, avocados are like
It's water.
it's not just water. It's mainly controlled by drug cartels.
Yeah.
Well, some of it.
Like
Not
the ones that
there
come from
is
Mexico.
some that is. No, let's not overstate.
I know. I just cut this
She's like,
out.
any
Cut it out.
Mexican
There are-
avocado.
There are some avocados that
That
are
are-
traded, especially when the price was peaking.
Yes.
Because again, as soon as anything's really expensive, cartels
People
are
are
like,
in because they're like,
should
we're
we
going to
pivot?"
moving stuff.
But orchids.
But orchids and
Orchids,
cactus,
cacti.
Well, how again? Explain how that is because they're taken from places. That,
Yeah. So for cacti, I was actually, while I was writing this book, I was in a cafe in Cape Town, and as all authors tend to be,
yeah, as you do.
type. And someone came with this big box. He was obviously very poor, and he just had a box of cacti that he had definitely just poached from somewhere.
Yeah.
And poaching cacti means you take them out of a natural space that you're not supposed to take things from, and you sell them. And the reason why people poach cacti is not just because they can sell them on immediately, but also because some cacti are incredibly slow growing. And so you can't cultivate them in greenhouses, for example.
Right.
And so you either steal them or you don't have them.
Yeah.
So there's
Hey.
a whole illegal market around that. That's just plants. I mean, there's animals, there's pets. There's, if you look at like Heathrow Airport
Yeah.
has a room just of confiscated things. They call it what do they call it? The kill room. They call it the kill room, and it's in a secret location because they don't want people to steal from the kill room.
Whoa.
Because that's where
Come
they have all the
on.
confiscated stuff. But they have stories. I mean, birds in little rollers. They've got like live birds, the transport of live reptiles. I mean, there's anything you have ever seen in the natural world has
People-
probably been illegally smuggled across the border and poached.
Now, so this feels very depressing, but you said before, and I think this is where we should end on, is that actually what happened. So what happened with this case, with the Shuidong Syndicate, and what is happening with wildlife crime in general? Are we successfully stopping it? Where are we?
The main thing with wildlife crime is that we are able to stop it.
Right.
And the Shuidong Syndicate case shows that even the biggest or some of the biggest ivory poaching gangs in the world can be shut down. And that to me shows that we can shut down wildlife crime syndicates in general. Ivory, of course, is just one example.
And is the syndicate shut down?
Yeah. It's so there was a raid on the various places and houses that were owned by the uncles and the three men, Wong and Shui, who were who had it was almost like breadcrumbs everywhere. There was like pangolin scales just like in their cars, in their luxury cars. And so these police were raiding it, and they were questioning people. They were getting confessions. They put people in prison. They had people who were informants. I mean, it was this huge. It's been dismantled, the Shuidong Syndicate, and the international trade in ivory continues to be enforced. And China has now also shut down its legal market.
Right.
And so that's where
huge success.
It's a
That's
huge
good,
success.
yeah.
And I think we can copy that for other kinds of things. And it shows that also working across borders, you can activate border guards, police, undercover agents, the people who invest. I mean, again, there's like so many points of intervention as well. And so I think for me, this was a really big, like, look what we can achieve if we know where to look.
It's incredible. I like it.
I love that.
We went into a dark place,
Yeah.
but then we pulled it back out again.
Yeah.
Well, I think, and organized crime is going to move into anything that's profitable. So, like, obviously what we need to make sure is that these things aren't profitable, or that there is so much faff that people don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now, we have one more episode with you, Julia, next week, where we get to talk about the book Green Crime, but also some of the bigger concepts.
In fairness, we have been talking about the whole time.
Which we have. But we get to talk about some of the big kind of ideas, concepts, some of the I guess when you've been doing this research for 3 years, some of the big ideas that you pulled from that. And I'm really excited to get into it. So join us next week, and remember,
Stay curious.